You are listening to the Malliard Report, a live radio show that ventures into the mysteries of life, as well as the hot topics of the day, either political or business. I want to welcome everybody to the Malliard Report. Before I forget, go over and pick up a copy of Rendlesham Forest, the UFO Conspiracy by Nick Redfern. He'll be on here in a couple weeks talking about that. I'm looking forward to talking to Nick again. But that's not why we're here tonight. Why we're here tonight is we got a wide range of topics we're going to talk about with my guest, Steven. I was going to tell you I was going to do that because I was looking at him like, oh, Steve, yeah. Now, Allan Stevo. So how are you doing tonight, sir? Sorry about butchering your name. And it's an easy name. I shouldn't be butchering. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a joy to be with you.
So let's start with the newest book, and then we'll work our way backwards. You've got the Face Mask One Lesson. I feel like I'm missing part of that title.
Face masks in one lesson. You got it right.
Okay, so give me the lesson then. Well, as much as you want to give me and try to sell the book too, I guess. Let's be honest.
No, I'll give you the lesson. The lesson in the book's 300 pages or so, but the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes of reading is the lesson there. And it kind of says, hey, this is for people who don't want to wear a face mask, and I present ways that millions of Americans can legitimately just stop wearing a face mask. And I do that in the lesson, and then I go through the rest of the book saying, here's the lesson applied to the grocery store. Do this a little differently at the grocery store. Here's the lesson applied to work, to school, on the airplane, to jury duty. Whatever it might be, this is the lesson applied through life. And it came out of some writing I did throughout the year. I was writing about the lockdown, and people kept writing me saying, hey, focus on face masks more, focus on face masks. I want to figure out how to stop wearing this stupid thing. And the lesson, I probably can't talk about the whole thing because it'll take a little bit of time, but I recommend some things like start by looking at your local public health order. Read that thing, because in many situations, no one has ever read that public health order. There's 3,000 plus counties in the U.S. Many people, when they send me their public health order, had not figured out where it was, had not read it before. And a lot of people, they read the press releases that come with the health order. And the press release says one thing, the news says another thing, the press conference says another thing. And everyone assumes that there's no exceptions, it's mandatory, blah, 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 blah. When you read your local public health order, you find out so many interesting things. Sonoma County, California, for example, says if you have trouble breathing in a face mask, you don't have to wear your face mask. That's almost everyone. The public health order is so has such wide exceptions. Michigan, the state of Michigan, under Governor Whitmer, who some people really dislike and have called her a tyrant through this period, the state of Michigan has exemptions a mile wide, such as when you're in a religious service, you cannot be punished for not wearing a face mask, or when you're speaking to a group, you don't need to wear a face mask. When you are voting, even, you don't need to wear a face mask. And there are many, many kinds of exceptions like that in all kinds of orders. And it doesn't have to just be from county. If you go to Trader Joe's, if you go to Safeway, wherever you go grocery shopping, you can simply say to whoever you're speaking to, how do I get a copy of your order? How do I get a copy of your policy on face masks? And they might point to the door and say, hey, there's our policy right there. It says, face masks mandatory. Do not enter without them. No, there's always a policy. If the company is bigger than a mom and pop, there's always a policy written by some lawyers that is very clearly laid out the exemptions. And it's going to be buried somewhere in paragraph 8, but they're going to be quite generous usually. And what works at a store is to simply talk to the manager before you enter the store with a quick 3-minute phone call. Now, I'm not asking your viewers, your listeners, to storm Omaha Beach to protect their freedoms. I'm not asking them to spend their Christmas in a fetid French trench to protect their freedoms, but with a 3-minute phone call, they can speak to a manager and say, hey, I'm unable to wear a face mask safely.
So
I'd like to come by about 2 p.m. What can you do for me? You do that, 95% of the time it works.
So you made a big list there, and obviously, like you said, we could probably spend the full hour breaking them down, but that's all in the book. But there's one that caught my ear because I think this one would probably, if I had to pick one, maybe I'm wrong, but this would probably be the one of value for most people out there listening, because I know people just often or flip it to whatever Walmart says, anyways, which is whatever. But it's at work kind of caught my ear because I think that one might be the stickiest of the wickets that you kind of mentioned.
Courageous people have written me, and they've said they've gone up to their boss and said, "Hey, you're implementing a face mask on Tuesday. I'm not doing that, and if you need to let me go, I understand." That's really the attitude it has to come down to. That's where it has to go. You have to be ready to do that. It's not the easiest thing to do. I get why a lot of people wouldn't want to do it, but you got to be ready to do that if you're serious about it. And there's a lot of other things you can do at work. You can just, again, you can ask your boss for what are the medical exemptions. You can start there. What are the medical exemptions to this policy? You can get into the ADA with your boss if that's what you want to do. You can go find an employment attorney or a disability rights attorney and say, "Hey, I've got a legitimate exemption here, a legitimate reason to not wear this face mask. It's recognized by the county, and I don't think it's fair for my boss to be imposing this on me." You can go that way if you want to. But in my book, having a conversation with the boss in which you lay out the fact that you will not come to work if you have to wear a face mask, I think that's really what you have to be ready to do. And I can tell you, I go through my day with no face mask on ever.
So Germantown Runner, big, I call him my producer of the show, so he's got a great question here for you. What is the best strategy for responding to irate Karens? I guess he has that in parentheses. I guess I should note that as well. It's because hysterically screaming at you in public to wear a mask.
The funniest I've heard people do, and I think it works pretty well, is to indicate that you need to read lips to understand them. And if once you do that, they feel really bad, and then they take down, you can pretty quickly get them to take down their own mask or to either walk away. The reading lips thing is really a funny way to kind of, in our era of who is the most oppressed person, and that person gets to treat anyone else any way they want, with no regard for what morality may have been at once upon a time. If you indicate you need to read lips, you win that conversation automatically. A mother of an autistic child wrote me saying, my son is having the hardest time with face masks because he needs to read lips to communicate. And this has just been a nightmare for him. All these people covering up their faces, he can't connect with them, he can't talk to them. But then she pointed out to me, what we don't understand is that all of us are constantly reading lips. And I never even thought about that before. It was such a beautiful, beautiful thought to me that we are all reading lips all the time when we're trying to communicate with another.
And not only lips, but emotion too, because there's the, when you send somebody a text message, there's that ambiguity of what you're actually saying versus what you actually said.
You're so right about that. This is when did anyone's parents raise them to say, don't smile, don't look anyone in the eye, when you shake their hand, don't make eye contact, right? This is a weird thing we're doing where we're saying, let's cover up 3/4 of our face.
That is okay. So Allan, let's circle the wagons back here and give people, I know you write for a number of places and all that stuff, so let's give a little bit of bio about you now. Let's get a little bit more deep into what you've done and who you are.
Awesome. I have written for about 15 years, and that's been the main passion of my life. And I spend a lot of time writing, and I spend a lot of time just kind of advancing freedom in my writing and and encouraging people to do the same. And 2020 has been a year that I've needed to write quite a bit on. And I've worked some exciting political campaigns in the past. In 2008, I was able to help with Ron Paul's presidential campaign, a congressman from Texas. In 2012, I was able to again help on that campaign. I've helped on many campaigns. Those two campaigns were especially exciting because a lot of people I'll say they were kind of fringe ideas. A lot of people with kind of fringe ideas would come in the door of his campaign, volunteer or work there, and his campaign kind of mixed people up a little, got them to know each other, and then they went off to their homes again, their home states again. And in 2012, Bitcoin was being talked about, among many other topics, and a friend of mine who I ended up starting a business with, he just wouldn't shut up about Bitcoin. He wouldn't shut up. So a few of us got together. We opened up a Bitcoin exchange in New York City. And I believe in Bitcoin for there's plenty of things wrong with Bitcoin. I believe in it for ideological reasons, that I think the Federal Reserve Bank is not the right way to handle money. And there's way better things we can do. And Bitcoin is this neat experiment in how money might be different. So we open up this exchange, and you can see this exchange there's a Netflix documentary, Banking on Bitcoin. There's plenty of documentaries that were made about our exchange called the New York Bitcoin Center. It was right next to the New York Stock Exchange. You can walk in with cash, walk out with Bitcoin. And that was just exciting and fun and in person. We might have 1,000 people through there some days. A regulatory body, the New York Department of Financial Services, said, no more Bitcoin trading like that. That is not allowed. And I understood why that might have happened, because we were very public about what we were doing, and the banks didn't like it. And we were outside the New York Stock Exchange trading some days at lunchtime, and the traders would be inside, and there'd be no action in there because that exchange is the open outcry environment is dying away. They'd be inside, then they'd come out. They'd come out because our pit would have 40 people in it trading Bitcoin, so they'd come out and be excited. So from there, what we were doing became forbidden by the powers that be, whatever. I ended up working in several different other Bitcoin endeavors, which has been incredibly exciting. This year I wrote a book, Face Masks in One Lesson, Face Masks in One Lesson, kind of helping people through how to never wear a face mask again. And there you have me.
There you have you. Where can people find you? Social media, website, any of those fun things before I forget, because I know we'll get talking here in a few seconds and I'll totally forget to ask you that.
I love writing a website called LouRockwell.com. The author, the editor puts people's writers' email addresses on there, and if you say something that's intellectually inconsistent in your writing, you're not just getting a comment section that you can easily ignore. Your inbox lights up, and people are just, what'd you say this for? Why'd you do that? And that's my favorite place to write, LouRockwell.com. And then I'd suggest checking out some of my books on Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com, or the many places people buy books.
You stay, so okay, I've got to dive into this just as a general writing approach. Do you have a set schedule where you write and then switch it off, or do you just write until your hand bleeds and then take a couple days off?
I find that when inspiration hits me, I've been very obedient to the muse, to the inspiration. I've been very obedient, and I always write down the idea somewhere. And if I don't have time to maybe get the whole idea out, I get up really early in the morning before anyone else is awake, and I make sure I have time every single morning to kind of get some of those ideas out and to figure out what I missed from the day before's writing. And then I publish very widely. I publish in places from the New York Post, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, I've published in the Daily Caller in the past, and The Hill, and many other kinds of websites like those. So I'm always kind of looking for places to send my writing to. And as long as I have nothing sitting around, it seems like the muse is ready to visit me and to give me more cool ideas.
I'm always impressed by people that can write, because I don't have that gift, but I guess I sit here and talk, so I guess that kind of makes us even, or equals that out, so I guess I shouldn't be so upset that I can't write, so we'll just call that good.
No, in our present era, someone who's able to speak his mind to an audience the way you're doing, I think it's not even par. I think you're a step ahead in my book. You're a step ahead. It's a very special thing.
So I want to take you back. I don't want to drag up the whole article, but I just found it. I skimming your stuff, and this head. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that, like I said, we kind of ran through this, and I just see this on the corner of my notes. You know how you kind of scribble those ideas in the corner of your notes that kind of just make things interesting. And I scribbled this one down, and it caught. Like I said, it just caught my eye. I think we're kind of here, and I think we're going to get deeper into this as we go. I think I'm going to start here and dive backwards. You wrote a story, an article called "Smaller Government Made the iPhone Possible," which blows my mind. But because I look at what the iPhone has done for people, while it's been great, it's also been the greatest hindrance. But I never even thought how we got to the point where it was at. So do you care to even remember any of those details about how you got there?
Oh, I love that. That's a detail of human existence that I think is just beautiful. So we had a telephone monopoly in the United States, as many people know, telecommunications monopoly, and you had to use AT&T, and that was from the 1920s. Almost everywhere in the U.S. you just had to use AT&T, either for long distance service or for local service. And from the 1920s into the 1980s, and if an economist came along and would say, "Hey, I know that monopoly is not the best answer," and there was even this theory taught in every economics class in the country, that it was natural monopoly theory. If you had the utility, there could only be one utility in that area. And you'd hear it from the Harvard economists, you'd hear it from the government PhDs. All the experts would say the exact same thing. And you'd have these free market economists who would say, "I don't know what competition would look like for telephone service, but I just know that when you let entrepreneurs compete for the spending dollars of consumers and try their best to please the consumer, that competition just creates a way better environment for the consumer. I just know that." That's what the free market people would say in the 70s, and they'd get laughed at. And the Harvard PhDs would say, "What are you talking about? You want 3 phone lines down every street? You want 3 buttons on the telephone? This is a goofy idea. What's wrong with you?" And the free market person would just say, "That's exactly why central planning doesn't really work. I don't know. One person can't figure out what the future may hold, and 8 people on a committee can't figure it out. But what does work are all these entrepreneurs, most of them who are going to go broke, trying to please the consumer. All these entrepreneurs kind of battling with each other to say, how do I please this consumer better? How do I go after that segment of the marketplace better?" And you end up with, from every American over a certain age knows exactly what the telephone looked like that was in everyone's house. And the telephone looked that way, the rotary telephone, where you could have black, or you could have a red one, but most people had their kind of black one, and you could have it on your wall, or you could have it on the desktop. Eventually there were buttons, but mostly it was rotary for a long time. And from 1948 to 1984, there was just one model change in that kind of telephone, and in that period there was just zero innovation. So little, I shouldn't say zero, so little innovation. Prices were expensive, service was poor. It was hard. You called 60 miles away. It would be very expensive to make a long-distance phone call, and you could barely hear what was going on the other end of the line many times. So you go from 1984 approximately to 2007. In that 23-year period, you go from rotary telephones, because suddenly there's competition in the marketplace. You go from rotary telephones to people carrying around a supercomputer in their pocket. There was now we all have supercomputers in our pockets. And like you said, iPhones might be horrible in a lot of ways. Okay, but the technology is developed. When you just kind of let the marketplace, the free market is so derided so often. But really what it is people trying to please the consumer and trying to make a buck from it. And we do end up with this supercomputer in our pocket because of the free market, because government was simply willing to say, I'm not going to be involved with this anymore. I'm not going to take care of my friends at AT&T who have paid me well for all these years, have funded my campaigns for all these years, because Congress and the rest of the government was willing to say, we're just going to step back. They didn't need to help anything. They didn't need to fund anything. They just had to step back, and amazing things happened. And in every industry where that happens, we're always pleasantly surprised by how much the consumer is able to be pleased. There may be other negatives to it, but it's very pleasing to the consumer when government just steps back.
It's funny to think about, though, because you're right. We went all that time with long-distance phone calls and just being a horrible way of life. I mean, I even remember trying to call some of my friends who didn't live that far away, and you had to dial the, what was it, 10-10-321, so you didn't have to pay the absorbent amount of long distance or call them after 9 or whatever the hell it was. Like, I'm not that old, but I remember this crap. And now it's like, pick up the phone and call halfway around the world, and now it's covered. It's like, what do you mean it's covered? It's crazy how how much competition has fueled this, and how much better we think things are today than they were. Which it just blows my mind. As I'm sitting here listening to it, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. It wasn't that long ago. We take that for granted. We think we've always had these smartphones in our hands and could always look up what we always wanted. So I guess that kind of leads to where I wanted to get. Well, where I was getting to, though. Now that we have them, now they're starting. I mean, there's Parler and some other things that are kind of the spigot's getting shut or filtered down a little. But I mean, obviously, once you start filtering it, you can filter it completely or just even shut it back off. Now that we're addicted to it, for the lack of a better way of looking at it, or am I overstating the importance of this, or what do you think?
Oh, that we're addicted to it?
Yeah.
No, it's horrific. It's horrific what's going on right now, where we're learning what happens to a child when you don't just raise the child in front of a television, you raise the child in front of a screen. It's awful what's going on. And there's nothing, a common thing to do right now is to say, oh, it's the technology's fault that this and that is happening. And technology can make some behaviors easier, but it's never the tool's fault that the human acts in a certain way. This is not a question of the tool. The tool is of neutral morality. It is a question of the human. So what we have right now is a nice opportunity to kind of have a conversation as a society about if it's good or bad for kids to be in front of a screen all day. And there's plenty of people, the closer you get to Silicon Valley, the more you have the experience that people do not want their kids in front of screens all day. They understand the damage that their products do to the human brain, to human interaction, to society. They get it. They some of them don't sleep well at night thinking about these things. Just like the cigarette manufacturers, the executives of cigarette companies, they long forbade their children from smoking because they got it long before the rest of society caught on about what was going on with the illnesses that would come from cigarette smoking. They knew it. They didn't want everyone in society to know it. They wanted their paychecks to keep coming, but they wouldn't let their kids smoke. Same thing going on in Silicon Valley. So now we have this chance as a society to say, hey, or as individuals, I should say, to say, hey, what are the risks of this tool that we have, that we use with reckless abandon? If you eat sugar with reckless abandon, it messes you up. If you read books with reckless abandon, that might mess you up. And this is an important issue of morality. What is proper to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's a very interesting time because we're so fascinated. I don't want to say fascinated, but I can't think of another word at this point, by it all. And then somebody comes in and says, you can't have that. And of course, our reaction is, well, why not? It just becomes, it's an interesting time, and it'll be interesting to see how it works itself out. I think we're right now still in the middle of it. And I mean, because I have this fascinating thing in my head that, the internet's this big global monstrosity, and we always think of it as ours, and that I think that relationship between what we think is ours versus what it is, because I mean, honestly, I do this show and I'm dependent on a bunch of people, a bunch of companies around the world just to make it work. If I, for the lack of a better word, piss them off, they could, I could be here today and gone tomorrow.
Isn't that something about how that's happened this week, that you didn't even with Parler, for example, there was this idea, okay, well, Twitter goes down, fine, there's other places to go to. But then, and listen, if you go to Silicon Valley, you see all these buildings, you see the headquarters, how close they are to each other. And then when you start to know some of these people, you see how inbred the relationships are. The executive at Apple used to be the executive at Google, and his daughter works at Facebook. And the guys at LinkedIn go out to lunch with the guys from I don't know, from the defense contractor down the street. So the relationships are so inbred, and it happened in such a coordinated fashion that it's just ugly that people said, okay, we're not getting the free speech we want. And it didn't just happen with conservatives. It happened with some Democrats as well this week, such as the Walk Away campaign. These people are longtime Democrats who started this thing, but they were just kind of a threat to the establishment message, and they got pushed off, and Parler lost their access with Apple and Google. But then there's this far more sinister thing that happened, in my opinion, and that's Amazon Web Services, AWS, which a lot of companies rely on. You may rely on them. You may not even know you rely on them. The idea, when I'm interacting with a Bitcoin company, I always ask, I want to know, do you run your own servers or do you use AWS? AWS is such a danger, that there's so much kind of internet influence centralized in this one place, and the kind of collusion that took place this week to silence Americans is so disappointing. And the fact there's a health freedom advocate named Del Bigtree. He's brought a lawsuit against YouTube because YouTube turned off his channel after Congressman Adam Schiff said Silicon Valley shouldn't let people like this who disagree with the CDC have a voice out there. This is government getting involved in censorship. If government directs big tech to silence people, this violates the First Amendment. That is the best lawsuit I've seen so far on the topic.
So I guess I would have asked this. I don't know if you've even thought about this, but I was sitting here thinking about it as you talked about it. Aren't these companies supposed to be in competition with each other for our use, or are we just so trying to be everywhere and make everybody happy that doesn't matter?
Yeah, the competition is. You're right. They should be in competition with each other, and what will come to happen is that, there's a time where the most important search engine in the world was called Alta Vista, and that was 1994. And I don't know the last time I've heard anyone say the word Alta Vista to me. The words Alta Vista.
I was about ready to say bless you or something. I'm not sure if you were having... And I'm old enough to remember Asking Jeeves, by the way, just for everybody out there listening.
Oh, yeah.
Who needs something else.
They have great marketing. These companies come and go. Google won't be with us forever. I don't know how long Google will be with us. There will be a time where it's gone. And the competition right now is, I would love to see more competition in the tech space. And any kind of partnerships with government reduces that competition. And they have military contracts and CIA contracts all over the place. And I wish government wouldn't even touch these companies, because it further empowers the biggest players and makes it harder for startups to come up. But there's so many. There's MeWe, and there's CloutHub, and there's Band.video, and there's Parler as well, and there's Gab, right? There's all these. It's such a wonderful time. We have competition, and it's all coming together. And some of these services, they're a little slow. There's Rumble. They're slow, some of them. But they're competing with each other, and they're going to vie with Twitter and Google and Facebook and Apple at some point. And it's going to be a beautiful thing. I wish there wasn't such turmoil right now and such political silencing of people.
I can agree with that. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, just because I don't agree with it doesn't mean I don't agree with the right to have to say it. Clear that up. Now that we're at this crossroads of government control versus government interfering in things people they shouldn't be in, that brings us back to Bitcoin. Man, this is flowing pretty good tonight. Germantown Run wanted me to ask you, J.P. Morgan came out and said it'll hit 20,000. 200,000, excuse me. Get all those zeros in the right places. Should have put the comma in there when I wrote it down, but that's here and there. Do you think it's really going to get that high?
I have been in the Bitcoin industry since 2013 as a founder.
Yeah, I was going to say, what'd you get it at for the first time you got it? What was it at when you bought it? Just brag
pretty
a
low
little
number.
Bit. I was going to say brag for a minute.
It was a pretty low number. If you watch some videos in which I'm in the trading pit trading Bitcoin, the price Morgan Spurlock, who did Supersize Me, he bought some Bitcoin from me, and he wanted to do a CNN special where he wanted to see if he could live off Bitcoin for a week. That in that clip, it was $627. I think he bought it at. Maybe it was $630, somewhere around there, between $627 and $630. And now it hit 42,000 last week, as far as I understand. But I don't watch the price very closely because the price is really boring to me. It's neat. It's neat that it goes up and that people get excited about it. But what's really interesting to me is the technology. And Bitcoin has this potential to really revolutionize money the way we know it. And just how we were talking about AT&T, what happens when government steps out of the way of the progress of telecommunications? You end up with this phone in your pocket that your grandparents would never have imagined possible. And in the same way, 40 years from now, if experiments like Bitcoin or any of the thousands of other cryptocurrencies take off, they could revolutionize what money looks like. I have no idea. It could be a thing 40 years from now. My grandkids might say, look at this way money functions. And I might never have imagined that you could do such a thing with money. And I don't know what that looks like. But sure enough, if we insist that government control our money supply, we can know pretty predictably what it's going to look like 40 years from now. If we insist government step out of the way, we have no idea the amazing things that can happen. And that might happen with all kinds of industries. That might be the case in, I don't know, healthcare. Maybe if government steps out of the way a little in healthcare, maybe we end up with these amazing innovations. Or in other areas of life that are so regulated by government. The possibility of it going to 200,000, sure, it can go to 200,000, it can go far beyond that. I'm not as excited about that as the potential for amazing things that can happen in society because of this technology.
I've got one that we need to disrupt right now, and we can do it. I mean, there's no reason we can't do this.
Here.
One time zone. Just be done with all this crap.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, seriously, this is just ridiculous. I mean, if you need to be open from 5 to 7, whatever time it is, and if it's 7 to 5 somewhere else, so be it. People will figure it out locally. I mean, it's 2021. Yeah. We'll figure it out. We'll adapt. I mean, the world is a global place, and trying to figure out what time it is in London right now. I'm counting fingers, trying to figure out what time it is in Los Angeles, even. Right? Like, I mean, this is ridiculous. If I say, hey, I'll talk to you at 9 o'clock Tuesday, Steve or Alan should be like, yeah, 9 o'clock Tuesday, I'm there. And that's it. That should be the end of the conversation. Not what time zone are you in? Are you sure? Is that Eastern? I mean, I know you're in New York, but is that Eastern or is that something else? Oh, God.
Like me, you've probably missed a few phone calls. You've missed a few opportunities because you couldn't get the time zone right when you did the math and wrote it in your schedule.
Oh, and then there's weird places that are 15 and 30 minutes off plus hours, and the places that don't do daylight savings time. Oh, give me a break. This should be the next, starting the campaign right now to eliminate time zones. Whatever. I don't care. I don't care if we go to 30-hour days. Whatever makes people happy. Let's do it. Let's agree on something. We need something new, something to all hang our hats on. Anyways, so back to the technology of this, because I am excited about this too, but give me some more of the details that most people don't talk about, because, I mean, user-to-user trade sounds fairly simple, but this isn't as simple as I'm making it sound.
Say that one more time. I didn't catch the whole thing.
Give me some more about the blockchain and how, because, I mean, a trade between two users sounds really simple. I give you dollars and you give me Bitcoin. It sounds really simple, but the technology behind all this isn't that simple.
Yeah, no problem. There's a concept called a wallet, and there's many providers who will allow you to have a wallet, and you have an iPhone, you go to the App Store, you have that's one easy way to do it. You just go to the App Store on your phone and you find a wallet. And there's good ones and there's bad ones. You kind of have to do your research a little. But once you have a wallet, and the only job of the wallet is to hold your Bitcoin. And what it's really doing is holding your private keys, which is the person who has the private keys is the person who has the Bitcoin. So you and I get together at a coffee shop. We've put an ad online maybe. You tell me, hey, I want to buy 5 Bitcoin, and I meet up with you, and we've agreed beforehand what you're going to give me in exchange for the 5 Bitcoin, and we sit down, we do that deal, and I send from my wallet to your wallet those 5 Bitcoin, and in a few seconds you will see in your wallet that the Bitcoin has appeared, that the transaction is beginning, and within about 10 minutes, that transaction is recognized by the whole network, the whole Bitcoin network. And in about 20 minutes, every 10 minutes, the network goes through a process where it recognizes the new transactions. In about 20 minutes, it gets another confirmation, and it makes that transaction more certain to the network. And what some people do, they might wait 60 minutes and say, once 60 minutes have passed, we're certain that this is a good transaction. And at that point, I take what you've given me, and you take your Bitcoin, and we go our separate ways. And it doesn't have to be 60 minutes. It could be much quicker. It could be a few minutes, depending on our level of comfort with each other.
So I've got a question. Has it always taken that long? Is this getting faster, or has this been the standard?
It was set up so that 10-minute period, in that 10-minute period, a new block is created. And you use the term blockchain, and that is the very first block of Bitcoin, the very first set of transactions, called the Genesis block, with the second block 10 minutes later built on top of it, and the third block 10 minutes later built on top of it, and every 10 minutes approximately to the present. And it's always supposed to be about 10 minutes. And the way it works is a bunch of computers are guessing at a number to see who gets the permission to be the person who kind of is the computer that is the one mining that block, the one who gets to process that 10 minutes worth of transactions. The word mining gets used in Bitcoin, but it's really just a transaction processor. And there's a little bit of a reward to the one who guesses that number correctly and gets to process that 10 minutes worth of transactions that have happened worldwide. And if all the computers, if fewer computers enter and it becomes, there's less competition for guessing at that number, the network knows to make that number easier to find. So it still takes about 10 minutes. And if the competition becomes very fierce and there's lots of computers guessing at that number, the network knows to make that number harder to find. So again, it stays at about 10 minutes. And it's not, if you go into, you can Google the piece of software called Blockchain Explorer, and there's many dozens of them. And you can just kind of go in there and you can poke around at how the blockchain looks. And it'll say things like how many transactions happened and how much money changed hands. And you can see, oh, wow, $20 million actually went from this account to that account. That's interesting. And you can kind of poke around and look and see what's going on. And the blocks aren't always 10 minutes. They might be 20 minutes apart. They might be 6 minutes apart. But generally, they're about 10 minutes.
So I know this too, but I'm going to sound like an idiot because I am an idiot on this topic, so bear with me for a second. I know there's a final number of Bitcoins to be released. How close are, I mean, what happens when we get to that, we're maxed out with that? How does that help this process?
That's the thing.
Go ahead.
That's the thing that all kinds of people are just kind of, they have all kinds of guesses about what could happen. So every 4 years approximately, that reward given to miners is cut in half. The reward given to the people who process the transactions is cut in half, from 50 to 25 to 12.5 to 6.25 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. And that's given as a reward for the work they did in guessing that number. And the process of guessing that number, it makes the network more robust. It brings more nodes into the network. And the 21 million Bitcoin you talked about, there's between 18 and 19 million Bitcoin in the world right now. Eventually it'll be 21 million Bitcoin, and it'll go every 4 years. That number of new Bitcoin created will have, and we won't reach 21 million Bitcoin until the year 2140.
Well, so we're ways off from that. I thought we were closer to that. So that's good on that front.
So it's intended, if Bitcoin exists for that long, and Alta Vista to Google, that's a short amount of time. Surely at some point there will be no Bitcoin. And I believe in the technology so much. I believe in the potential so much. I think Bitcoin is fantastic in a lot of ways. But I'm willing to accept that, hey, there's going to be no Bitcoin one day, and that's okay. It's going to be something better is going to come along, and that's cool. And I wrote a book on it in 2015 called the Bitcoin Manifesto, because there's so much nonsense from Wall Street about how horrible Bitcoin is. And there's so much nonsense from the Bitcoin community about how amazing Bitcoin is. It's got lots of flaws. It's not perfect. And it's really cool in a lot of ways. And that book, the Bitcoin Manifesto, kind of, it still today is very pertinent because there's so much nonsense out there. And it really very clearly, I think, kind of lays out some of the philosophy behind Bitcoin. It's a quick read, and it kind of says, don't trust people who tell you this, don't trust people who tell you that. Look, it pierces some of the nonsense.
Okay, I can imagine the Wall Street of people saying it's uncontrolled, unregulated, and all that. I mean, that's an easy one for me to follow. But what's one of the things that the Bitcoiners overhyped themselves on?
Oh yeah, we live in this era that's so trendy, and even the idea that you let a child walk around with a face mask on right now, we have no idea what that does to a child long term. We've never had. It's just because it's become trendy. Fine, let's put a face mask on a kid because it's unstudied. We're doing experiments on our kids, and it's totally about a trend. And all around us, there's this constant kind of emphasis on ignoring whatever ancient wisdom is. And there's wisdom that there's lots of people, it might be in the Bible, it might be in other places, but there's lots of people for lots of generations who have tried at things and failed. And over time, they said, hey, this I know to be like a truth in life. And they pass it along, and other generations try and fail, and they say, hey, that truth really does work. Okay. So this kind of accumulation of wisdom that our culture is so rich in and has such an amazing inheritance of is just thrown out the window constantly in the present day because there's such emphasis on trends. So Bitcoin is a trend. Bitcoin is 12 years old. Some of my friends will hate that I'm going to say this. Bitcoin is talked about as digital gold. That's nonsense. Bitcoin is talked about as better than gold. That's nonsense. There are things about Bitcoin that are better than gold, but gold's been with us for thousands of years. It's a recognized store of value. You don't take something that's 12 years old and say, okay, now I'm going to push aside all these other things that have 4,000 years of history because I have this cool 12-year-old thing that suddenly has a nice big ticker on CNBC with the price. That's the opposite of what anyone should do. Bitcoin has a neat place in the world, and gold has an important place in the world. That would be one example of hype. Bitcoin's better than gold.
Man, I wish I would have bought some 12 years ago, though. Just saying. I have to say it because I think everybody has that moment of what could have been.
Hey, man, you might be saying when you interview me, when you do my 45th interview with me 12 years from now, you might be saying, I wish I would have bought it 12 years ago.
Oh boy. Because if it hits that 200,000, that's up, 150 from where it is now? That's a pretty good return on investment. And you have to look at it as an investment at this point, because if you sit there and try to watch it daily, I think you'd go insane. I guess there's day traders on Wall Street too, but drives me. I'd be nuts, but that's just me.
Yeah, I think you shouldn't look at Bitcoin. This is another thing that upset some of my friends that in the Bitcoin industry. I'll say Bitcoin is a bad investment. I think Bitcoin, there's companies like Berkshire Hathaway run by Warren Buffett, who I have plenty of disagreements with, but in the solid nature of how to run a company, Warren Buffett has provided many great returns year after year, predictably for his investors. To me, that's an investment. You know you're going to put money in, you're going to get more money out at the end. Bitcoin, I treat as speculation. Even though a great deal of my own life is invested in the industry, I still recognize that in terms of investment or speculation, it's speculation. And I don't know if it'll go to zero before it goes to 200,000, or if it'll go to 200,000 before zero, or if it'll go to $1 trillion of Bitcoin. I have no idea. It is speculation, and anyone who loses sleep over their Bitcoin, the money they've placed in Bitcoin, has placed too much money in Bitcoin. And the same with gold, and the same with anything else. If you lose sleep over it, you need to take some of that money out, because you shouldn't be losing sleep over these things. The amount of money you should put in Bitcoin is only the amount of money that you're willing to lose, and that it won't bug you to lose.
Facts. It's like gambling. Back to the addictions. Anyways, I wanted to ask you about Slovakia. I know you did a great, was that a blog series you did on that? I was reading some of it this afternoon. Of course, it kind of all went over my head because I'm not worldly enough to understand, but I figured maybe you can, again, enlighten me here a little bit.
I'm really honored you read that, first of all. I had the joy of living in Slovakia for a few years after college, and I'd send articles. I thought blogs were total nonsense, and I'd send articles to American newspapers about weekly column ideas in Slovakia. I thought the culture was just amazing, and I thought there was so much for an American to learn from that culture there. And no newspaper editor wanted to run a column on Slovakia. Where is Slovakia even? Could they even find it on the map? And the country had only existed for a handful of years. It used to be Czechoslovakia. And so I finally said, you know what? why am I wasting all this time with these editors who really don't want it? Why am I not just starting a blog, which I think are horrible? And I ended up having the most well-read, well-regarded English language blog on Slovak culture and politics, and it was just a joy to read it. But something I should ask you more about what you want me to go into, but something about Slovakia that just was amazing to me is you have Slovakia is right next to Austria and Hungary and the Czech Republic, and there's just this neat mixing of ideas that occur there, and a neat mixing of languages. People kind of they're their own people, their own languages at home, and they might go speak other languages to their neighbors of a different culture. And coming from the American milieu I grew up in, there was a very black and white existence in the U.S. And going there, I kind of had a different perspective. And one of my students might have a grandfather who fought for the Nazis, and the grandmother he married might have fought for the communists. And where I came from, a communist and a Nazi, those are both very evil things. And I just kind of had a different perspective about these kinds of ideas from being there. Also, I was deprogrammed. I came out of there. I came out of my school, a very obedient socialist. I'm embarrassed to say I came out of school an obedient socialist, and I went to this country that endured 41 years of communism, some very horrible stories, and it didn't take long for someone to sit me down and to say, you know, these things you're saying about how wonderful socialism is, let's talk about my experience with that. That was very good for me, very, very good for me to have that perspective and to get deprogrammed a little, because I was really indoctrinated. I think I understand why people burn cities down with that kind of indoctrination. I get where they're coming from. I feel their pain. I wish many young Americans could spend a few years in Slovakia.
How did you end up getting there? I guess is my first question, because that doesn't seem, unless you pulled the globe over and did that thing, I don't seem to figure out how you got there.
I had family from Slovakia 2 generations back, and I grew up in a Slovak congregation, a Slovak church, and this church would send missionaries to Slovakia and finance missionaries in Slovakia during the Cold War. And this was kind of a way through the Iron Curtain. And after the end of communism, there was a church school there that said, hey, it was a 400-year-old school that got closed down. And they said, we want to rebuild this school. We want to make it amazing again. And what we think we're going to do is we'd like to have American lectors teaching American literature and British literature. And that happened for about, I don't know, it happened for 10 years maybe. And I'd heard about that a little bit, and I wrote a teacher there, and I said, hey, I'm going to graduate in a year. I think it'd be kind of cool to see if I could teach at your school. Would you be up for that? And the rest kind of all came together. But I had this neat opportunity to teach there, and I planned to go for a year and stayed for 3 as a teacher.
Wow, I mean, that's just that blows my mind. Would you have any interest in being a teacher to start with before this opportunity presented itself, or just all became this giant ball of unknown?
It became a ball of unknown. I didn't particularly want to be a teacher, but that was it. Just really was a wonderful first job for me. I can tell you that. I had 400 students, and I taught them writing in such a rigorous fashion, and before I knew it, parents were coming up to me saying, I can feel that you're really teaching my son how to think. And it was just a great few years. It fit me very well.
So why'd you stop? overly simple question.
I was 25, and I said, hey, I've wanted to be a writer. I'd been writing novels and books and stories since I was like 7 years old. And I said, I got this dream of being a writer. Either I have to take it seriously or I have to get rid of it. And there's not going to be any middle ground for me. I'm either going to do it or not do it and quit with this dream. I'm not going to carry this dream around with me till I'm 73 years old and say, okay, it's finally time to write. Let's do it now. Let's quit jerking around. And I left my job and I started writing 40 hours a week, probably more like 80 hours a week because I really loved writing. I quit my job and I started writing. And that's what I've been doing so much. The rest of my work has been kind of like, you gotta fill the rest of the time with interesting things so that when you come to your writing, your mind is fresh. And that's what the rest of life has been in a lot of ways. The writing means so much to me.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, I'm glad you decided to. But it had to be an interesting conversation because you were doing well and having a great time, and then trying to, again, jump into the bowl of the unknown, which just is kind of awe-inspiring to me because, like I said, it just seems so different than some of the things we hear.
I'd like to encourage your listeners. This is a special year of re-examining oneself and what are one's priorities and things like that. And if there's something in life that you're kind of like saying, yeah, I guess I can do that, and there's something else in life where you're saying, heck yeah, that excites me. I hope you will, especially in a time like this where there's so much crisis around us and so much uncertainty. I hope you'll say, I want to do the heck yeah, that excites me thing. And these days, I barely do anything that isn't heck yeah, that excites me. If someone says, I got this cool opportunity, and my answer isn't heck yeah, that excites me, I'm just kind of like, no, I'm going to pass. And I think we can all get there to like say, what is that thing that's heck yeah, that excites me?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great time, and especially since I know, like, when I talk to people that are talking about doing a podcast, I'm like, well, now's the time. There's no excuse. When I started years ago, you needed mixers and microphones and da-da-da-da-da, and now you could pick your phone up when we hang up here in a little bit and download an app and do it instant. Almost, I don't want to say instantly, but comparatively speaking, what is it? Gone in 60 seconds, you could be there. And I think it's a great time for all of us.
It sounds like you like that iPhone a little bit. That's what it sounds like I'm hearing.
Well, I do, but I don't, right? I will fully admit that I'm, in love with it, but I'm in love with the possibilities and the potentials it presents me. Finding interesting people and talking to interesting people, plus creating stuff that, honestly, like you said, your grandparents wouldn't even imagine creating. So, Allan, oh boy, I look at the clock and I'm like, I've got 50 seconds left, so I better start wrapping this bad boy up. That big number starts flashing at me, and it's like, oh no! First, thank you, sir, for everything. We've kind of worked the range out that I wanted to get through, and oh man, I feel like I left so much on the table trying to get through everything. So
thank you for having me. Thank you. I hope your readers will go out and get face masks in one lesson. My name's Allan Stevo, especially if they don't want to wear a mask again. I hope they'll do that.
And order the Bitcoin book or any of the other. There's great. There's a wide range of things that something should hit their fancies. So again, thank you, Allan. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Take care.
Man, literally flying by tonight. Ooh. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Malliard Report. Stay tuned for details on saving money at the Duck Pond Shop. I hope you enjoyed this report. Please subscribe so that you can join us again. And if you appreciate the show, leave us some stars or a review. For more notes from this show or other great shows, check out Malliard.com. A reminder, the views and opinions of this show are those of the host and guest and do not represent any sponsors, affiliates, or any other partners of the Malliard Report. Now for your money-saving tip. Promo code Malliard at checkout of duckpondshop.com. where you can get your t-shirt, coffee mug, and other great products. That's promo code Mallard at checkout, duckpawnshop.com. Until next week, stay safe and keep quacking.